Hey guys, Trey here. Another severe weather event on tap for the southeast, potentially a significant one. After last week's event on Wednesday, right on the heels, going to come another chance for a significant severe weather event for parts of the southeast. So I wanted to do another forecasting discussion. This time will be for Thursday. You can see the SPC has a day 3 enhanced risk out for a big portion of the southeast, from eastern Arkansas, northeast Louisiana, across much of Mississippi, southern Tennessee, into the western half of Alabama, surrounded by a slight and marginal risk area as well, with a significant severe area possible in the 30% hatched area. So going to take a look at some models, kind of compare them, look at some observed data, and see if we can kind of piece together some initial thoughts on this potential severe weather outbreak. So let's go ahead and get started with a broad view here. Here's our satellite image. You can see just a beautiful, beautiful low across the Midwest, firing off some thunderstorms there in northeast Missouri, southeast Iowa, into western Illinois. Kind of a cold core setup up there today, but just if you like cool satellite imagery, this is certainly one to behold here. Beautiful system with a cold front extending all the way down into the southeast, firing off some thunderstorms down there as well. Texas and Oklahoma is dry. If we take a look at our surface map here, you can see, which we'll look at more in depth in a second, but you can see dew points have decreased quite a bit here. They've been in the 60s the past couple days. Now in the mid to upper 30s, low 40s out there for much of Texas into Oklahoma. So drier air overspreading the region after that cold front came through, but that should not last long. As you can see this swirl over Arizona, desert southwest, that is a manifestation of the weather maker that is going to be responsible for this severe weather outbreak potentially on Thursday. Let's go to our 500 millibar map. You can see a big trough on the heels of this leading trough that caused some severe weather yesterday across southern Oklahoma into central Texas. This one, though, very strong jet streak, positively tilted at this point. Not going to be the case. It is going to turn negatively tilted as it ejects into the southern plains. And there's kind of going to be two sort of ejections, two kind of separate ejections of this jet streak into the plains. There's going to be one, you'll see on the models here in a sec, that's going to be a player for tomorrow night. There is a slight risk out for the Arklatex region out down into Louisiana and Mississippi. Mainly going to be an elevated storm threat, although there will be a conditional threat for surface-based storms. Not going to talk too much about that in this video, but that will be the first ejection. It's going to kind of go off to the north here, and then this second sort of piece of energy, second part of the jet streak, going to eject into the southeast for Thursday. That is going to be the stronger of the two, and that will provide some pretty good kinematics and dynamics for a severe weather event in the southeast. So let's take a look a little bit further into the surface map here. Once again, a little bit drier air out here across Oklahoma into Texas. Dew points have plummeted into the 30s and 40s out here, with winds out of the northwest and west behind the cold front. We still have southerly flow, though, across Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, ahead of this cold front. This cold front is not going to be a Gulf sweeper, as we call it. It's not going to push the cold air all the way into the Gulf. We're going to be able, once this trough ejects into the plains, we're going to get surface low development out here to the lee of the Rockies and the southern plains. That should help once again pump moisture into the southern plains and subsequently the southeast for the severe weather event on Thursday. And you can see it's kind of hard to see on this map, so we'll take a wider view here. You can see 70s dew points lurking just offshore there in the Gulf. So that moisture, that deep moisture, boundary layer moisture, ready to surge onto the Gulf Coast into the southeast states as this surface low develops. Once the first portion of the trough ejects, then we should get sort of continued cyclogenesis there as the sort of second piece of energy ejects and keep that fire hose going into the southern plains and southeast. Let's go ahead and look at our little bit of our surface map. You can see what we saw on satellite, that beautiful low out there. We can see clearly 998 millibar low here across the sort of by the Omaha area. The Topeka area out there in Nebraska, Kansas, northwest Missouri, southwest Iowa is where it's centered. You can see the pressure the kinks in the isobars there. That is indicative of our cold front. Looks like there's somewhat of a warm front there extending across central Illinois, Indiana into southern Ohio, northern Kentucky right there. You can see those kinks in the isobars there. But again, once this trough starts to eject into the plains, we should get surface low development once again out here, eastern New Mexico, west Texas, and that should help pump that moisture northward. And so, again, we talked about this last week with our Wednesday severe weather event, our high risk in the southeast, that I really look for two things, among many others, but two things I found that a lot of Dixie Alley severe weather outbreaks, as far as supercell tornado outbreaks, not your squall line events with embedded tornadoes, your discrete supercell tornado events, outbreaks in the southeast. They really have two things. The flow aloft is quite a bit more westerly or zonal, has a decent westerly component as opposed to more meridional, north-south. And there is an elevated mix layer, or capping inversion, that sits over the warm sector and prevents the storm mode from becoming really messy early. Lots of storms erupting in the warm sector and ruining the environment for tornadoes and supercells. So as we go through here, the models here, keep that in mind. And before we go through that, we'll actually take a look here at some soundings, some observed sounding. This is the 12Z sounding suite here. We'll start out where our EML source region out in New Mexico and West Texas, the high plains there. We do see somewhat of a plume of lapse rates, steeper lapse rates there here at Albuquerque, down at El Paso. I guess you could call that. It's not really a classic looking EML out here. If we go to Midland, there is somewhat of a steep lapse rate plume there. Del Rio, not too much of an EML. There is, here at Corpus Christi, there is a layer of steep lapse rates there that could be somewhat of a remnant EML there. Kind of the same thing at Brownsville. And then we'll take a look at Dallas, not so much. So EML looking a little bit, not quite as potent as you'd like to see for a southeast severe weather event, at least 2 days out here. This easily could regenerate over the next couple days. Although there were I believe some rain and storms out there in Arizona that might move into New Mexico. Keep temperatures cool, lapse rates not quite as steep, and as the trough ejects into the plains, it'll carry that air with it. And if there's not really much EML to be found with that air, then we may have an issue as far as a capping inversion goes. So for our event on Thursday. So something to keep in mind, something to watch there. It does look like there is a little bit of a remnant EML plume here across some parts of the region here, but not really a stout EML like what we saw last Wednesday. There was a pretty stout EML last Wednesday. Not looking like it'll be the case this time, and we'll check the model soundings as well to see if it's progging an elevated mix layer. But right now, just from what we're seeing with the soundings, doesn't look like there's too much of an EML to deal with, except maybe down here with southern extent here at Corpus Christi and Brownsville. So, all right, now that we looked at the data here, let's go ahead and take a look at the models. This is the 18Z NAM. 0Zs have not come in yet, so this is the latest model run that we have. So this is the 18Z NAM. Here's our initial piece of energy here that prompted the slight risk yesterday in southern Oklahoma and Texas, and the marginal risk, some thunderstorms today in northeast Missouri. That is going to move off pretty quickly as our secondary trough, our trailing trough, starts to become negatively tilted here tomorrow. Again, tomorrow night, likely a severe threat from the Arklatex region, north central Texas into the southeast. Likely associated with a warm advection regime. We should get surface low development again as those westerly and southwesterly winds go over the Rockies. We get height falls on the lee side of the Rockies, and we should see a pretty significant cyclogenetic response here at the surface. And it looks like we do. A little bit farther south here, though, into far south Texas, west Texas, and that is going to be our player for Thursday. You can see that kind of moves off in the footsteps of the current low, surface low, and that'll be the player. It moves off into the Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky region there again, but it's still pumping southerly flow, moist return flow here onto into the Gulf Coast states, priming the environment here in the warm sector for Thursday. So again, we'll take a look at the 500 millibars. That first piece, you can see kind of that first piece up here, Oklahoma and North Texas there for tomorrow. That kind of moves off to the north, and we get this sort of secondary piece here move off into the southeast. Solid defluence aloft here. You can see the wind barbs here across Arkansas, Louisiana are out of the sort of south-southwest, changing to more southwesterly here across Mississippi and Alabama. So a little bit of defluence here aloft across Mississippi and Alabama, and that should again help with rising motion, which is what we need for storms. So the one thing we're going to see here with this event, as opposed to our high risk last week, is a low-level jet in place. The low-level jet really lagged behind the main forcing last week. Had some questions about some veer back veer weaknesses in the mid-levels of the photographs. That's not going to be the case. You can see we have a very potent low-level jet here at 850 millibars across the region, 40 to 50 to 60, 65 knots here across this entire region from eastern Louisiana, much of Mississippi into Alabama for much of the day on Thursday. Given surface winds out of the south, as we saw when we took a look at the surface map, and such strong 850 millibar flow, our low-level jet very strong, we're going to have very large looping photographs here in the warm sector. You can see winds out of the southeast here even across Mississippi and Alabama, veering rapidly to sort of south-southwesterly and ramping up to about 50 to 60 knots at 850 millibars. That's going to give you very large photographs here across the warm sector. So as we go through the day here, our low kind of moves off to the northeast, and along the cold front here, trailing cold front, winds start to veer as that cold front approaches, but winds stay nice and back throughout the day across Mississippi and Alabama. Let's take a look at our moisture return here. You can see that cold front really doesn't make too much more progress. It kind of, as that first surface low sort of continues to move off to the northeast, it's going to kind of leave its boundary, that cold front in its wake, and then that should return as a warm front tomorrow, and then into Thursday we'll get continued moisture flux into the region. You can see a very broad warm sector here across the southeast states, dew points into the upper 60s, low 70s, even down here in south central Mississippi into southeast Louisiana. So moisture not going to be an issue here. We should have very, very strong wind shear to play with here. And so let's see if we see our EML. And one thing I forgot to mention, like I said, we'd like to see more westerly flow at 500 millibars. This would do it. This would definitely do it here, especially with southern extent. A little bit more of a westerly component here with southern extent. Up here, a little bit more meridional flow. So down here into Mississippi and Alabama, and then down into the southern half of Louisiana, a little bit more zonal, a little bit more of a westerly component to the flow here at 500 millibars. So that's a plus. But now let's take a look at our EML. Let's see if we do have any of that EML generation here out west, and which gets convected east. We'll go ahead and look at 15Z here. We'll just take a few soundings here in the warm sector, just kind of picking some random spots here across the region. And so 15Z would be 10 a.m. and you can see there's no cap in place at all. Might be a little bit of one there, but that is pretty minimal. Again, SIN, -10. That is basically like having no cap on the atmosphere. So that might be an issue here. 15Z, the atmosphere is wide open. Parcels can rise freely. So that is concerning that by 15Z, by 10 a.m., we already have a wide open warm sector ready for storms to form. And given the degree of forcing here, very potent jet streak aloft, that leads me to question whether or not this warm sector is going to stay pristine throughout the morning hours. Um, let's go ahead and look at if we see any short waves going through here in the morning hours. And so we see the flow. We see one here. See the kinks in the isobars here. This is about midnight Thursday. So I would expect a round of storms to be ongoing here across the southeast. Does look like it moves off somewhat. And we might have a second shortwave here between 15 and 18Z. See maybe a little bit of a kink in the isobars here, or in the height contours here, suggesting we may have a shortwave here by about 18Z, by about midday, lunchtime. We may have storms start to go up here between 15 and 18Z. Now, we saw that last week on our Wednesday event, that storms went up very early. We had our first tornado on the ground by lunchtime. First tornado was in progress by lunchtime. And with a wide open warm sector again, are we going to have a lot of storms develop in the warm sector? If we do, the overall discrete supercell tornado threat may be tempered. Things might get messy here early on. But as that jet streak moves off, Alabama, southern Tennessee might be next in line. Yeah, so it looks like, as far as timing goes, the shortwave and the forcing might be just a hair mistimed. We'll go back to 500 millibars, see where our main trough is. And you can see it does kind of lag back here. The axis of that trough does kind of lag back. Here about 18Z, though, it starts to overspread the region. So this would suggest to me that storms are going to go up fairly early by lunchtime, if not earlier, given that shortwave we saw at 700 millibars. Leads me to question, given the uncapped nature of the soundings we saw, are we going to see the warm sector get messy quickly? So that's a question we'll have to wait and see. But going back to some of those soundings, this is at 18Z. We take some soundings here across the warm sector, and you can see just a very large looping hodograph, ample instability, upwards of 3,000 joules per kilogram of instability here. We'll take a couple more just for good measure here across the warm sector. That is a wonky one. So that's something to notice. There is convection ongoing in that sounding we just pulled. Let's see if we can pull it again. I can't really pull it again, but convection was ongoing in that sounding, so the models are showing some sort of convection here ongoing. And this is at 18Z, so 10 a.m. But you can see the atmosphere already very much primed, very much a tornado environment here. Large instability, large low-level instability, 130 0 to 3 kilometer cape with large looping hodographs already at 18Z. So the atmosphere will be primed early. The question is the warm sector going to get messy quickly? Here's a 21Z and just an absolutely ridiculous sounding here, ridiculous hodograph. Just massive curvature in that hodograph with ample instability. Still 3,000 cape and 130 0 to 3 kilometer cape. Same thing with these soundings. So atmosphere definitely supportive of, the parameter space at least, definitely supportive of significant tornadoes. Question is, again, will the warm sector stay dry enough for discrete supercell development later on, late morning, early afternoon? That is the main question. So that is something to take a look at. I guess we can take a look quickly at the GFS. I don't really love the GFS at short range. I've never really found that it's extremely useful. But we can take a look at it quickly. Here's our first kind of piece of energy for tomorrow night's event, and then kind of that secondary piece of energy. Again, 18Z, that trough starts to impinge on the region. The forcing impinges on the region. So I would expect storms to be ongoing by this point, by lunchtime on Thursday. Again, very strong low-level jet across the region by late morning, early afternoon. So hodographs should be very large and looping. Let's just take a couple sample hodographs here from the warm sector. If it'll load. Would expect something similar to what the NAM was showing, very large looping photograph with ample instability. Looks like these are having some trouble loading here, but no worries. I would expect the same thing to be true. We'll see. Well, it's not. Well, something's wrong with COD there. So we'll go here to pivotal weather, and we'll take a look at here our surface chart. This one will actually show the dew points along with the surface pattern. So as we go into Thursday, see the moisture return ongoing. Very strong surface low there. Flow should be very much backed within the warm sector. Yep, and there you go. By 18Z, environment is definitely suitable for strong tornadoes if a discrete storm mode can be maintained. Let's go back to 15Z. Let's go back here to 15Z and see if it's showing any semblance of an elevated mix layer to suppress. Okay, so the GFS is showing a little bit more pronounced of an inversion here. Whether this is a model kink, a model sort of quirk, not quite sure, but there is a little bit of a cap here at 15Z on the GFS. Again, same thing here. So the GFS potentially could be showing more promise for a capping inversion to suppress convective development at least until late morning, which would still be okay, although the forcing would not really arriving a little bit early prior to the diurnal heating cycle, which is not ideal if you're not extremely ideal, although the parameter space is still off the charts. Let's look at the euro real fast. Much of the same, very potent jet streak there. And the euro, this is at 18Z. See that forcing again starts to overspread the region, and then starts to almost move out of the region here by 0Z. So all these models showing a little bit of an early show. My first inkling is that if the trough can be delayed by about 3 more hours, so we get storms to fire closer to 21Z, and the peak forcing coinciding with peak heating more, then the southeast is going to have major problems. This could be approaching a pretty significant tornado outbreak. If the trough can slow down, maybe 3 hours, and that's all it's going to take is about 3, 4 to 5 hours, maybe. That's all it's going to take. So right now, a little bit of a mistimed wave may help things get a little messy early, given the uncapped warm sector by morning, at least on the NAM. But if this thing can slow down maybe 3 to 5 hours, then this could be approaching a pretty significant tornado outbreak. And just for good measure here, this is our sort of cheat code, the short range ensemble forecast product, these significant tornado probabilities here from the SPC. We'll go on to Thursday here. You can see by 15Z, already seeing an enhanced area there centered on northern Mississippi. That continues 75% contour and then a 90% contour across south central and east central Mississippi. It's rare that you see a 90% contour the day of an event, but a couple days out, this is something to watch for sure. So takeaways, models are in pretty solid agreement here. GFS showing maybe a little bit more of a cap, a little bit more something to be worried about as far as the warm sector staying clear. And while we're at it, I guess the 0Z HER is not out yet. The cams don't go far enough out, except for the 3-kilometer NAM. So I know you cam fans out there want to see the sim reflectivities here, so we'll go through what the NAM 3K is showing. There's our batch of storms in the Arklatex area overnight, Wednesday night into Thursday morning. And you can see here lots of showers going up This is at 15Z, 10 a.m. Lots of showers going up across Louisiana, Mississippi, into Alabama. But it does produce discrete supercells by 17 to 18Z here. Mississippi Delta area into northwest Mississippi. It is showing discrete supercells. And whenever the 3 kilometer NAM shows discrete supercells, I always take notice because generally it's either no storms or a squall line. It's just the quirk with the NAM nest, the 3 kilometer NAM. So when it shows discrete supercells, I always do a double take a little bit, and it's showing somewhat of a discrete mode, a little bit messier as the day goes on, but it is showing at least a window for discrete supercells here across Mississippi in the early afternoon hours. But again, lots of showers and storms in the warm sector that could clutter things up as far as keeping the warm sector pristine throughout the morning hours, and may make the storm mode a little bit messier overall and decrease the tornado threat as a result. But parameter space is definitely volatile. This is a very high-end parameter space. Whenever we see 3,000 CAPE and 400, 500 plus effective storm relative helicities, that is a top-tier parameter space. The questions again surrounding storm mode and whether or not the warm sector will remain uncluttered. If it does, I think the ceiling for this event, I hate to say it, could approach some of the more significant outbreaks we've seen in Dixie Alley. If the warm sector is messy, then I think we'll still get some tornadoes, potentially some strong, but they will be more likely embedded within clustered convection or more linear convection. So we'll have to wait and see. Models tomorrow might give some more clarity. Again, if the trough slows down 3 more hours, I think 3 more hours it slows down, and we're talking pretty significant tornado outbreak. So we'll take a look at the models tomorrow. We'll come back with you potentially with another video if we have time tomorrow. But again, if you're in these regions, keep an eye on the weather. Keep an eye on your local forecasts. It could be another dangerous day on tap for portions of the southeast. So that's all I've got for now. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.